Hey everybody, diversity is not a strength, contrary to public opinion. If you actually Google, I dare you to Google, does diversity create social cohesion? You will see that the links will actually show you studies showing the opposite. As a matter of fact, anybody who has a background studying the science of diversity would know about the Robert Putnam study. The Robert Putnam study, what's really interesting about it, by the way, is it was made by a liberal named Robert Putnam from Harvard. He designed a study to prove that diversity was a strength, yet he found the opposite results. There was 32,000 people in the study. The average study has about 1,200. Usually, if you have about 1,200 people in a study, you can get a very accurate sample size that would be conducive to the same results you would get if millions of people were studied. Anyways, Google the Robert Putnam study yourself. Don't take my word for it. A lot of you won't believe me, anyways. But the Robert Putnam study showed that people that live within diverse neighborhoods, they trust their neighbors half as much as normal. They are also way less likely to engage in civic activity, and they were way less likely to donate, and they watched a lot of TV. They watched a lot of TV because they didn't socialize with their neighbors anymore. Look at Detroit, Baltimore, Atlanta, New Orleans. Frankly, if diversity was such a strength for white people, frankly, why did all the white people move out of Baltimore? Why did all the white people move out of Detroit? For example, Google it yourself. 85% of Detroit is now black. But it used to, in the 60s, it was like at least 90% white. I mean, let's have some common sense here. If diversity was such an upgrade for white people, frankly, why did all the white people move away from Detroit? I mean, the answer is obvious. I mean, black crime is through the roof. I mean, have you ever Google black crime versus white crime? I mean, black areas compared to white areas have 13 times the murder rate. I believe about anywhere from 20 to 50 times the violent crime rate. They have about 15 to 20 times the rape rate. And by the way, about 80% of rapes by black men are versus white women. Also, Google this yourself. I mean, please do not take my word for this, folks, because I have hundreds of hours studying this. And I'm not saying I can't be wrong, but I'm just saying after hundreds of hours, I have seen many studies and many people talk about this. For example, I believe there was about like 30 to 40,000 rapes last year by black men versus white women. You know how many rapes there was by white men versus black women? There was literally about 100. So, I mean, other people have talked about this. I mean, blacks are raping white women at 3,000 times, roughly, the rate that white people are raping their women. Now, I don't care what race you are. If another race that you're living around is raping your women at 3,000 times the rate, that's not going to work out so well. Now, the media, CNN, will not report this. What else? Yeah, I mean, diversity creates huge conflict because of the crime rates. Now, also, Google average IQ among race groups. I mean, there is a difference in average intelligence. For example, liberals never want to talk about this, but Asians get the highest grades in America every year. Well, that is East Asians. Average East Asian IQ is 105. West Asian IQ is 90. Average white IQ is 101. Average Ashkenazi Jew IQ is 116. By the way, Ashkenazi Jews have the highest IQ average in the world at 116. Google this yourself. I know many of you are scared to look at it. They've been doing IQ testing over 120 years, by the way. I know a lot of you liberals are scared to talk about this, and you would just love to shut me up because you don't really believe in free speech. You believe people should not be able to talk about these subjects and debate them openly and talk about the science of IQ testing. And if you're an IQ test denier, seriously, you have to be stupid because everybody knows that there is a difference in intelligence among people, And frankly, there is a difference in intelligence among race groups. I mean, like one guy who wrote a book about this. The odds of all races evolving with the same average intelligence would be literally the odds of like 1 in 1 billion. He said that it would be the same odds as flipping a bunch of quarters and they actually land, standing up, which would be basically impossible. Why don't you guys? I mean, you guys liberals. I used to be a liberal. I swear to God, I voted for Barack Obama, but back then I was an idiot. I mean, I didn't actually study this stuff. I did not. I've never studied IQ testing. Have you? Have you ever studied crime among race groups? I mean, I bet most of you haven't, and you're scared to do it because you're scared to see that there's differences, and you don't want people like me or anybody else to even discuss them. Oh my God. If you discuss them, you're just the worst person in the world, right? Now, by the way, I've been banned from many radio shows for even trying to talk about this. They're very scared of freedom of speech. They're very scared of me talking. For example, the John Gibson has banned me. The Todd Starr Show has literally banned me for talking about IQ testing science among race groups. They do not want anybody to discuss this as a factor within politics or why some races get better grades than others every year. And by the way, it's well known that education cannot raise IQ. Google can education raise IQ. I always say this because I want you guys to actually study, not, please study stuff like I have. And, you're going to see that most of the links, as a matter of fact, I just seen some studies showing that a lot of scientists, they think that IQ is over 75% genetic. And that the study was showing that school maybe has only a 5% impact on intelligence. For example, Washington, D.C. Blacks get some of the lowest grades in Washington, D.C. every single year. Every single year. Yet the teachers in Washington, D.C. make on average $70,000 a year. The state average is $60,000. So the teachers are making some really big money in Washington, D.C. I mean, you're not getting terrible teachers when you're paying them $70,000 a year, folks. Yet, even though they get great teachers, blacks still get some of the worst grades. The truth is, black American average intelligence is 85. I mean, that's what the science has shown for the past 120 years since IQ testing began. Also, there's been over 5,000 large-scale IQ tests done over the past 100-some years. These are hidden by the media. Have you ever noticed that CNN never talks about this? CNN never says, hey, look at the IQ testing this year. They try to hide it. They don't want to talk about it because if they did, they would look stupid. Because they want you to believe that the reason that minorities get bad grades is because of racism and other people holding them down. It's not true, folks. White people in general are not going around saying, I want to hold down black people. Believe me, I'm white. I'm just saying it is not true. Black African average intelligence is 70, which is the lowest average in the world. Average black African head size, or brain size, is 1250 cc. Like average white brain size is 1500 cc. Google this yourself. Don't take my word for it. I know a lot of you libtards are scared to actually Google this and study it. And you're just scared of people like me who are willing to even discuss it as a possible factor as to why some races get better grades than others or make more money on average. And another thing that liberals are really scared to talk about is why Asians, who have been here the least longest, by the way, in America in general, they make the most money in America. Asians make more money on average than white people. As I said, especially East Asians, which have a higher IQ than West Asians, by the way. Notice liberals never want to bring this up as a talking point because Asians are a minority. And, it's like, oh, why does Asians, they're a minority and they're doing the best of all races. I mean, folks, wake up. Welcome to reality. I'm going to try to get you there. But if you're scared to Google stuff or scared to Google a few of my points, you're hopeless. And many of you are. Many of you will just use hate. You'll hate anybody like me that brings this up as a possible point. Now remember, I mentioned that average East Asian IQ is higher than white people by 4 points. I mentioned that Ashkenazi Jew IQ is higher than white people. So I'm just being honest here. I'm just being honest. And if white culture, though, is not best to some degree, if you study immigration and you ask people around the world their top destinations of where they would like to move to, it's all white countries, folks. Number one is always USA. Like number two would probably be Canada. Number three, Australia. And number four, somewhere within Europe. I mean, there's never a migrant crisis in Africa. There's never a migrant crisis in Asia. Um, well, Asia is smart enough actually not to let a lot of people in. They don't want diversity. They're smart enough to realize that diversity over time creates conflict. But anyways, there's never a migrant crisis within a Muslim country, for crying out loud. I mean, my God, some of these liberals who think that Muslims are so hunky-dory. I mean, of course not all Muslims are bad. That's not what I'm saying. But the problem is the radicals always seem to get in power. They're the ones, I guess, willing to fight. And I mean, look at Muslim countries. The radicals are generally in power. They're forcing women to wear burqas. They're majorly against homosexuality. And it's a very, very oppressive. Muslim countries are very oppressive. And a lot of liberals need to wake up to this reality of this. Matter of fact, I'd love to do an experiment where I send, liberals go live in a Muslim country who don't believe, they think that it's so hunky-dory there. I would love these liberals to go live in a Muslim country for a few years, and then let's have a conversation about how they were really treated. Because believe me, a lot of them, if they were to actually, especially live in an average area, believe me, they will come back and be like, oh my God, you would not believe how I was treated. You would not believe the average opinion about homosexuality. I mean, their whole world, a lot of liberals live in fantasy land about these subjects, folks. I mean, I used to be the same way until I actually studied this. So, anyways, the point, diversity is not a strength. Look at America today. We're more diverse than ever, yet we're more divided. I mean, look at politics with Trump winning. I mean, nobody can say that politics is more divided than ever. And by the way, this whole idea that we're all going to unite someday, honestly, it's just fantasy land. We're never going to unite. There is going to be a war at some point, honestly. I hate to say it, but diversity is going to lead us into a war because there's only so much, frankly, white people can take. I mean, the white middle class is paying the majority of the welfare. By the way, from what I've studied, only whites and Asians were the only two groups within America that actually pay more in taxes than we use in welfare. Blacks, Mexicans, and Muslims, they use way more welfare on average than they're adding to the economy. For example, if you look at government data, Jared Taylor has a video about this, using he goes over Center for Immigration Statistics. For example, 85% of Black and Latino families are on welfare. I mean, that's high. And I mean, who do you think's paying for this? You think that, anyways, a lot of you will hate these facts. You'll be scared to Google them. And, oh, by the way, another way that liberals lie to us, they try to manipulate the data on welfare, is they say whites use more welfare than blacks. That's true, only because, folks, if you're smart enough to understand what I'm about to tell you, whites are 65% of the population. Blacks are 13%. What's amazing, if you're smart enough to realize this, is that blacks are using almost as much as welfare as white people, yet they're 5 times less the population. That's how liberals and Democrats try to manipulate dumb people who are not smart enough to realize this. They don't mention that white people are 65% of the population and blacks are 13%, yet they're using almost as much as welfare as white people who are 5 times more. I mean, that means that blacks are on welfare at maybe 5 times the average rate of welfare as the average white person. Anyways, look up the CIS, Center for Immigration Statistics, for more on this. Democrats, they're not willing to even talk about it because they know it's true, and they're trying to you know, a lot of these places, they know it's true. They just try to manipulate you by never using per capita. Remember that if you're smart enough to understand this concept, that a lot of these people, they're not willing to talk about per capita ratios when they talk about what, like, welfare statistics, when they talk about crime statistics. They don't want to talk about per capita. They want to talk about an overall average, you know, among. Anyways, if you're smart, you'll understand what I just said. Pretty easy, folks. But I hate to say it, but diversity is not a strength, and it's basically gonna, you know, I mean, it's gonna lead us into a war. And frankly, for white people, it's not really an upgrade unless you consider high welfare and constantly having to move to get away from all this stuff. You know, I'm saying the truth that a lot of people won't. An average IQ of a mixed child is 89. Google it yourself and actually study it. I mean, that's another reason that racism and diversity, frankly, are never going to go away if you're smart enough to understand this. I mean, for anyways, the point of that is, yes, there is differences among race groups. I mean, I got black friends that I shoot pool with, and I see a lot, and I have a lot of respect for. I have a lot of respect for people like Larry Elder, who's willing to talk about this honestly. Even Charles Barkley has talked about this, that, you know, humans are tribalistic and they want, you know, they vote, you know, I mean, look at how people vote. For example, about 90% of black people vote Democrat. I mean, come on, it's like a huge, politics is a race war, and I'm going to make another video about this, but I'll cap on it real quick. I believe about 70% of white people, actually, I think it was 60, but anyways, about 60% of white people voted Republican this time around, 2016. 90% of black people voted Democrat. I know at least 80 to 90% of Muslim Americans voted Democrat. Latinos, the same thing. I believe 85% of Latinos voted Democrat. Now remember, they're also blacks, Mexicans, and Muslims. You know, if you're honest, they are on welfare rates at much higher rates than whites or Asians in general. So yeah, I mean, of course, they're going to vote for a party that's going to give them lots of freebies. I mean, that's how politics is a race war, and nobody's willing to talk about it. CNN will not talk about the statistics I just told you. They don't want you to know that 90, that's why most people don't even know this. And by the way, Google this yourself. I mean, anybody that's really educated on politics knows this. I mean, this is basic 101. For example, that 90% of black Americans vote Democrat. That's why CNN doesn't want to talk about it. Has CNN ever mentioned on air that 90% of black people vote Democrat? They might have, I don't know, but it's not something they would generally bring up. They definitely don't want you to know this in general, because they don't want people to realize how politics is so racialized, and it's basically a race war between whites versus non-whites at this point. I mean, another point, that diversity does not create social cohesion. Folks, diversity does not create social cohesion, and especially if you're white, because we're the ones paying the majority of the bills. We're the ones who have to constantly move away due to the different crime rates. You can deny the crime rates all you want, but believe me, after studying this many years, it's a load of bull. I mean, Google black crime versus white crime and look at what 90% of the links say. I mean, you know. Anyways, this is enough for one video. It's a 20-minute rant. I don't want to make these videos too long. I was planning on making it maybe 5 to 10 minutes, but by the way, YouTube will demonetize these videos. They won't. A lot of people will be very interested. I got over 5 to 6,000 hours studying politics, believe it or not. I mean, I'm a political junkie. I study this stuff all the time. And by the way, I do look at CNN. I watch CNN. I watch both sides, because I really like to be open-minded about things. And anyways, this will be my first video, and thanks a lot for tuning in. And yeah, let's get this channel rolling, because I'm one of the few people in America that really are willing to talk about certain issues and be honest about them. Thank you.